Big time fight coming up at middleweight this weekend. You probably heard us talk about this if you're an avid Fight Night Picks fan. If you're not, well, good to see ya. Hey, I'm looking forward to this one. We have Argentina's Laureano Staropoli taking on North Carolina's Jamie Pickett, the Night Wolf. Is it a good nickname? It's not that bad. It's not the worst I've ever heard. Rashad Coulter's Daywalker's the worst. Rashad, I want to hear from you, but also everybody that's tuning into this one down below in the comments section. Who do you have in this fight between a couple of dynamic guys? One guy's a middleweight, one guy's a bit of a transplant in Staropoli, and the other thing that I know, this fight was moved because it seems like there was a coach in Pickett's corner that tested positive for COVID or had a little bit of a COVID adjacent. So the fight was moved to our card coming up this weekend. We have a prediction video from a few weeks ago. We'll throw it on back to that, update the odds, and give you our final thoughts on this big one. We have the Night Wolf, Jamie Pickett, taking on the Day Wolf. No, it's Pepi, Laureano Staropoli. And Matt, when I look at this fight, it's a weird one because of where both of these guys are at. Normally we save this until the end, but I'm going to mention the odds just to tell the story of this fight. Because for Argentina's fighter Laureano, he opened a minus 150 favorite. He's a minus 213 right now. For Jamie Pickett, he opened a plus 130. He's a plus 172. And for Jamie Pickett, trains with a bevy of good fighters, Joe Selecki and John Salter among them. I thought Joe Selecki won on the weekend over Jared Gordon, but still, when I look at this fight, the question I ask is, why is Laureano Staropoli such a big favorite when he's lost his last three to Muslim Salikov, Tim Means, and Roman Dolidze? Good fighters. Don't get me wrong. All good fighters. Jamie Pickett losing to Tafon Chukwe and Jordan Wright by knockout, and that knockout loss was about 4 months ago. Still relatively soon, I would think, and it was a quick one too. But when I look at this fight, where's all this confidence in Laureano Staropoli, who kind of had his best times at 170 pounds?
That really is the strange thing about this fight. When I think about Staropoli, I think of him as a welterweight. I never really put him in the middleweight division because I thought he looked better at 170 pounds. I know he lost to Tim Means, and maybe I think way more about Tim Means than I should, but like, it's not the end of the world. You had a pretty good fight with him too, and the weird thing about Staropoli is, look at his fight with Roman Dolidze. You know what was a big issue in that fight? The size of Roman. It was a massive issue for him in that fight.
Well, Roman was coming down from 205 to 185.
Yes, like Fergie famously sang about, they met halfway. The thing about Staropoli, though, was I thought that after you get out-muscled by a guy at 185 pounds and you have shown the ability to fight down at 170, you would then go back to the smaller weight class. It's kind of like Misha Cirkunov. If Misha Cirkunov ever fights at 185 pounds again, everybody around him should get fired tomorrow because he moved down in weight. His cardio looked bad. He didn't really, you know what I mean? Like, there was a lack of aggression, if you will. And I would say that you could point to the weight cut as a factor. With Staropoli, I think his size always is going to be a factor with him at 185 pounds. And unless he is able to just put such a crazy pace on these middleweights, I don't really know where all this success is going to come from at middleweight. And even with Jamie Pickett, like, Jamie Pickett's performance against Chukwe didn't look good at all. And then if you look at the Wright fight, like you said, it was over pretty quick, so you can't really take much from it. But I don't really love the fact that he is coming back so quick after such a flash knockout like that. Because I normally say, hey, 6 months is like the perfect test for past 6 months. Then you can come back after a knockout loss. I don't love the damage that Pickett has taken through his last two fights. I just don't really know what either guy is supposed to be doing in this division.
When you look at Jamie Pickett, he was on the first episode of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series in 2017. He lost to Charles Byrd. He got finished in that one. Then he comes back in season 2019. I don't know what you want to call it.
How did that go, Craig?
Season 3. Lost by decision to Punahele Soriano. That's going to happen. Then he comes back in season 2020, so that's season 4, and he knocks out Jonathan Patti with as Dana White put it, a 22-punch combo. But it was insane. It really was insane. So then they match him up with Tafon Chukwe, a guy who had a win over William Knight, who won on Contender Series. And you looked at that fight and you went, well, why? And then the scores were 30-25 and 2 30-26s. That's not great.
No.
Then they give him Jordan Wright, who... we're talking out loud here. We're having fun. The guy knocks people out and he gets knocked out and he's fought guys with bad records and he lost to Joaquin Buckley. So let the chips fall where they may, but he knocks out Jamie Pickett. So I look at that. I worry about it a little bit. Looks like he's been training his jiu-jitsu a little bit, so that's great to see. But from Pickett, decent striking when he's outside, and when he moves in, he has a lot of success. Or he gets hit with that shot. For Laureano Staropoli, out of the fights that he had, he was 7-1 coming into the UFC with all of his wins by finish. Then he won 2 decisions, one over Hector Aldana. That won him fight of the night bonus. So that's pretty cool. You get to start it off pretty good. Then he beat Thiago Alves by decision. That's great. And then you look at it. They give him Muslim Salikov. Well, listen, maybe he didn't have the greatest, or he did have the greatest fight against Francisco Trinaldo. Muslim Salikov is one of the most classically trained, best strikers you're going to find out there at 170 pounds. The scores in that fight, Matt, 30-26, 30-26, 29-28. It was a 10-8 round 2. Then he takes on Tim Means, 30-27, 29-28, 29-28. Okay, so he had one good round. Then, in his last fight, Roman Dolidze, all 3 30-27s. And the problem in the Means fight and in the Dolidze fight, the pressure really caused Staropoli issues with the takedown attempts, but also just getting in close.
And I was going to say, it was very different types of pressure, and that's an important thing to say. It'd be different if it was just one thing has worked really well against him in the past, but you're 100% right. With Tim Means, he pressured with his volume, and then he mixed in his wrestling a little bit. With Dolidze, he was just all over you at all times with his footwork, and then mixing in the wrestling. So no, I think that's a really good point to mention when you do bring up the game of Staropoli, because he feels like one of those fighters who, when he's the one moving forward, he can have a ton of success, but when he's the one being pressured, I don't know if he's just always thinking about what has to come next when he is the one on the back foot, but there always seems to be a gap between the fighter in Staropoli who's moving forward and the guy who's moving backwards.
Jamie Pickett also has a giant reach advantage in this fight to go along with a slight advantage in height. He's the middleweight. To me, Staropoli had that one fight against Dolidze up at 185 pounds, but I know him as a welterweight. So the adjusted odds for this fight, we have Staropoli, who, quite frankly, is where he was a few weeks ago. He's minus 240. He's remained roughly there. For Pickett, somewhere around a plus 200. If we look at the Topology picks for this one, 676 total votes, 77% Staropoli, 81% by decision. For the 23% that have Pickett, 54% by decision. I'm a little bit surprised by that amount of Staropoli voters getting him the win by decision, because for Pickett, durability's been a little bit of an issue. Staropoli, though, has been more of a welterweight that for some reason now finds himself at middleweight. But what we talked about a couple of weeks ago is the fact that for Staropoli, you look at the 2 losses, they're against really big middleweights. I mean, Roman Dolidze, and I guess I should say back at 170, the 2 losses, Tim Means, and then Muslim Salikov. I mean, Salikov's ranked right now. Well, Tim Means could fight ranked fighters and get wins.
Yeah.
And Roman Dolidze, on his best day, when he's not talking to Eric Nixick and worrying about what, he looks like in the cage, he's a really, really dangerous guy. So for Staropoli, just again, everything has to come into play. Everything he's done, coming into the UFC, the Alves win, everything he did outside, he has to just bring it all together and fight a very clean and smart fight against a guy like Pickett.
So this is what I have to say. Since neither guy got COVID, it is hard for me to change my prediction. Like, we've done this a few times where someone's camp will get COVID, and you gotta do the quick Instagram search. Okay, was it the fighter? Did they get hospitalized? Like, how serious was this? And now, luckily, for the most part, with a lot of MMA fighters, they might get it, might not feel good for a couple days, they come back in a few weeks, everything's good. Sometimes they're not, and that's what we have to kind of ask ourselves on these remakes. But since it was only Pickett's coach, it's not like I'm adding any more stock into the fact that, now I think Pickett's going to lose even more than I originally did. But I still do like Staropoli in this. I don't love the fact that he is fighting at middleweight now. I did prefer him down at welterweight, but I don't think losing to a guy like Roman Dolidze means that, okay, now you're down to Jamie Pickett. He really only lost that fight to Dolidze because Roman is as big of a middleweight as you can possibly be. It just sort of wore on Staropoli as that fight went on, and I do like Laureano's staying power in this fight.
When I look at this fight, and I look at blown up Gavin Tucker on the right-hand side of the screen here, I mean, I think he definitely has a great opportunity in this fight. For the Night Wolf, you got to use that size, you got to use that physicality and his volume. We've seen him use his volume to win him fights. Look at the Jonathan Patti finish. As Dana White put it, what was it, a 22-punch combo is what he said? But I really do see this one as very close, and due to that, I see value in the underdog status of Pickett. I mean, Pickett had a hard time with the physicality and size of a guy like Tafon Chukwe, who probably a light heavyweight maybe. Like, really, I mean, when it comes down to it, now you're fighting a much smaller guy in Laureano Staropoli. And again, Jordan Wright has knockout ability. Staropoli definitely does, but at 185, I think it's that sweet spot. I think it's going to be a really tough fight. I like Jamie Pickett in this one, ever so slightly, because I see value in that underdog status. So, both of us disagreeing on the pick. I have North Carolina's own Nightwolf Pickett to get the win here. Matt going with Argentina's Staropoli. Can't wait for this fight, though, because this should be a very dynamic one between a couple of guys who need a win at that. So, can't wait for it. Let us know down below in the comment section who you have in this one, and stick around for that main event. Costa taking on Vettori. I'm popping popcorn it up. I can't wait. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.